Landmark reforms today in the communist government of Hungary. The Hungarians will maintain their place in the Warsaw Pact, but major changes are coming in Budapest's relationship with member countries. CNN's Doug James reports on today's extraordinary turn of events.
The Hungarian Communist Party has voted itself out of existence. An overwhelming majority of delegates to the party Congress supported the creation of a new political movement to take its place. A party in which the tenets of communism will be relegated to the scrap heap in favor of Western-style socialism.
Egy korszak véget ért.
An era has come to an end, and the Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party, as the party state, has come to an end, representing the history of a party state.
The victory for reformers came after 2 days of bitter wrangling on the floor of the conference hall, with hardliners refusing to go along with a wholesale transformation of the party. But other political factions came together to change the course of Hungarian history. The death knell sounded earlier in the day when Communist Party General Secretary Karl Gross announced his retirement. He later voted against the changes. Casting out the old guard and casting off the old image was considered crucial if the Hungarian Socialist Party, as the new group will be known, was to have any hope of winning next year's first ever multi-party national election. Those who refuse to accept change are now expected to go their own way, and that, according to the founders of the new party, is for the best.
MSZP ezen a kongresszusán.
The Hungarian Socialist Party at this Congress is facing its past and gives a political assessment of it. It distinguishes itself from the sins, from the mistakes, and from the errors.
Those who voted for the changes will now have to choose their leaders, who in turn will have to convince Hungarians to join the new Socialist Party and support it at the polls. The stage is now set for a complete revamping of Hungary's political, social, and economic future, a future in which the Hungarian people will have a voice in the running of their nation for the first time in over 40 years. Remarkably, a goal achieved not through revolution, but by an uprising within the Communist Party itself. Doug James, CNN, Budapest.
Thousands of Soviet citizens marched in a pro-democracy protest today. They walked through a cold drizzle to the walls of the Kremlin. The demonstrators carried signs of support for Parliament member Boris Yeltsin and others.
And the eventual withdrawal of Soviet troops. One counterpoint to all of this, the leadership of the renamed Hungarian Socialist Party, formerly the Communist Party, voted to retain the party's rights to organize in the workplace. That is one of the oldest political strategies for keeping social control.
As the demonstration grew in size, more police moved in. They formed a human chain trying to contain the 5,000-plus crowd. A shoving match began. The demonstrators were shoving back and yelling for the police not to use force. One woman had to be held back. She's calling the police pigs, saying they are hateful. Western television cameras were not exempt. Erich Honecker's hardline East German government does not want the world to see this. It can't be lost on Gorbachev or Honecker, the similarities of these scenes to those in China when Gorbachev was there earlier this year. But the East German authorities no doubt will crack down far more quickly than the Chinese did. This kind of event surely won't be allowed once Western television cameras leave the country Sunday night. The authorities have refused to renew visas for Western news organizations beyond them. Earlier Saturday, Gorbachev and Honecker stood smiling together, watching as heavy East German military hardware rolled down Karl Marx Allee. The big parade ordered up by Honecker to celebrate the 40th anniversary of communist rule in East Germany. But the made-for-television parade will quickly be forgotten as word of this demonstration, the biggest in recent memory in East Berlin, spreads around the world. By late Saturday night, police had cordoned off the center of the city, and big trucks carrying hundreds and hundreds of riot police with helmets and shields could be seen heading toward Alexanderplatz. Steve Hurst, CNN, East Berlin.
Describing it as peaceful. For tonight's report on the changing face of communism, we go to correspondent Alan Pizzi on the scene in the East German city of Leipzig.
Chanting, "We are not criminals and we want democracy," tens of thousands of East Germans took to the streets of this industrial city tonight in defiance of government wishes. They called for freedom to travel, free elections, and democracy without force. It was the second time in a week that mass demonstrations have been held here. The protesters drew inspiration from Soviet perestroika. They repeatedly chanted, "Gorby, Gorby." The excuse for the gathering was a series of church meetings to pray for political detainees, including some held for just this kind of protest. The churches did their best to avoid confrontation. Doors were closed as soon as the churches filled, hours before the prayer services were to begin. To those locked out, there was a plea from the city council. No demonstrations in the streets, please.
The unofficial opposition seems to be gaining both strength and momentum.
Our demands, which we had since 6-7 years, are now the demands of the whole society.
Victory for the opposition groups comes in emotional moments. In this case, the announcement that most of the demonstrators arrested last week were to be released. Many feared it will take more than a few victories to keep East Germany from either blowing up or dying slowly from the exodus of skilled workers to the west. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Leipzig, East Germany.
Against Soviet oppression that ended 2 weeks later with Russian tanks in the streets of Budapest and 25,000 people killed trying to fight them.
As recently as just 1 year ago, the small groups of people who did dare to gather to mark the anniversary were beaten or arrested by police. This year, for the first time after 33 years, Hungary can celebrate the anniversary legally.
It's a sign of how much has changed here that the soldiers are only ceremonial, and tens of thousands of Hungarians jammed the square in front of the National Parliament without fear. They carry a new flag. The red star has been dropped from it in virtually every public monument and banner in sight. Hungary is showing its national colors. It no longer counts red among them. Jonathan Mann, CNN, Budapest.
Later in this broadcast hour, a discussion with two European reporters on the significance of this day.
It is rush hour in San Francisco of the 1956 anti-Soviet revolt. Thousands cheered in a public square in Budapest as the head of parliament read a proclamation declaring Hungary a republic. 2 weeks ago, the Communist Party turned itself into a democratic socialist party, setting the stage for multi-party parliamentarism.
It marked the official end of communist rule and the first approved commemoration of a crushed quest for freedom 33 years ago. CNN's Jonathan Mann tells us about it.
It was Hungary's Declaration of Independence, independence from the Communist Party. As the bell tolled 12 noon, the country's acting president, Matthias made the announcement. The Socialist People's Republic of Hungary had become simply the Republic of Hungary, a multi-party democracy with a new constitution modeled in part on that of the United States. This, he said, is a prelude to a new historical era. It is also an era's end. 33 years ago to the day, Hungarians tried to reform their country much the same way and free it of Soviet control. The Hungarian uprising of 1956 lasted just 2 weeks and ended with Soviet soldiers and tanks in the streets of Budapest. 25,000 Hungarians were killed. But for those who survived, the decades-old dream now at last seems achieved. Vera Dorogman was in the crowd for the declaration of the Republic and for the uprising 33 years ago.
There was a revolution here, and it was afternoon, and the people were coming thousands and thousands, and they hoped Hungary would be free. But this happened only now. We hope the freedom is coming only now.
With that freedom, Hungarians have literally cut Russia's red star from the center of their national flag and most of their public monuments. More substantively, they have also planned for presidential and parliamentary elections, the first free elections in Hungary in more than 4 decades. The Hungarian Communist Party has even voted itself out of existence and resurfaced as the Hungarian Socialist Party,
hoping the new name would make it easier for voters to forget its old rule, the one party in Hungary's one-party state. It is a time of tremendous excitement in Hungary, but also anxiety, because many Hungarians can't help wonder whether the Soviets will stop their steps towards democracy once again.
What I'm afraid of mainly is that maybe there will be some change in the Soviet Union, that Gorbachev might fall or something, and then there could be some serious trouble.
But those doubts didn't stop the day's celebration from carrying on into the night, or end with speeches, cheers, and optimism.
Despite the possible parallels, few Hungarians expect a repetition of the events of '56. The momentum for change in the Soviet Union, Hungary, Poland, and even East Germany is now far too great. For the thousands of people gathered here, this time there will be no turning back. Jonathan Mann, CNN.
The holes in their centers where the state seal containing the Soviet Red Star should have been. On the streets, thousands of Hungarians for the first time officially mark the anniversary of their short-lived 1956 pro-democracy uprising. And there are other signs of change in this Eastern Bloc country. Hungary's Magyar TV reports on one of them.
Human rights now. That was the slogan of the World Concert, as organized and digitized by the Amnesty International last year. When Bruce Springsteen, King, Tracy Chapman, and the others came to sing us about freedom and democracy, no one could have been sure about the future of those 161 people who were in prison for refusing military service during the last years. But the times are changing, especially in Hungary, year by year, week by week, day by day. When we lived in a people's republic, the police had the right to arrest demonstrators on the 32nd anniversary of the revolution on the 23rd of October last year. But now, when our constitution announces that the state form doesn't need the word people anymore, the government has to face the demand of the opposition parties to take off the Red Star on the top of the parliament. So in this new political and historical era, the Hungarian group of the Amnesty International can start its work freely.
Our slogans can be independent from all kinds of political parties and movements, including, of course, our government. Help for everybody. The Hungarians got a lot of international help and solidarity, especially from Western countries. No, we should like to help for those persons who need it all over the world. And, of course, solidarity with everybody.
The fact that the Hungarian organization is the only one working without any punishment in Eastern Europe increases the responsibility to help the groups existing illegally in the socialist countries. This is Beatrix from Budapest for CNN World Report.
And when CNN World Report continues, two reports.
Magyarok a nagyvilágban, külföldi barátaink. Az országházból szólok hazánk lakosaihoz.
Since the 1956 uprising against Soviet rule, an estimated 100,000 Hungarians cheered the new republic. Some were waving red, white, and green Hungarian flags with a hole in the middle symbolizing the communist emblem cut out. Acting President Matthias Suras proclaimed the new republic is a prelude to a new historical age. The declaration comes as the nation officially commemorates the start 33 years ago of the Hungarian revolt against communistic rule. A plaque marking the support of the uprising was unveiled, and hundreds remembered those killed in the revolt with candlelight vigils. Soviet tanks crushed the 1956 uprising 2 weeks after it started.
The Hungarian parliament, during a spontaneous show of support, overcome with emotion, many Hungarians cried and ripped the hammer and sickle from flags as they denounced communist rule. It was the first time the people of Hungary have publicly marked the 1956 bloody uprising crushed by Soviet troops and tanks. Hungary's acting head of state, Mateusz Tudeg, says the country has aspirations for a free and democratic society. Last week, Hungary's parliament purged all Stalinist elements from its constitution.
Recent political change in Eastern Europe has brought with it wrenching economic change. But one Eastern European country was already well on the road to a market economy. That nation is Hungary. Hungary's Minister of Trade has spent this week in Washington and New York trying to increase the flow of dollars to his country in both aid and investment. Grant Perry has the story.
When Tamas Beck, Hungary's Minister of Trade, looks out at New York's skyline from Paine Webber's headquarters, he sees more than tall buildings. He sees money.
If you look across the river, the white buildings across the river, there are buildings. We have in Jersey.
Beck has mastered New York shorthand, and the former head of the Hungarian Chamber of Commerce is trying to learn American business lingo as well on his week-long visit to the United States. He has been welcomed by a number of leaders of American business, here by Donald Marin, the chairman of Paine Webber.
We've been following the developments in Hungary very carefully. It's very exciting. This country went through its own revolution a long time ago, and we're very happy to see that yours is going to be very successful.
Revolution or evolution, something clearly is happening in Hungary. Just listen to the members of the Hungarian trade delegation. They're not just officials, they're businessmen with a newly Western perspective, like the head of Hungary's largest retail chain. When it was his turn to talk, Hungary's Minister of Trade didn't beat around the bush. Everything is important that brings profit, he says. An understatement. Hungary desperately needs foreign capital. The country's $90 billion economy is stagnant. It labors under a foreign debt burden of $20 billion, the largest per capita debt in Eastern Europe. The adjustment to a market-oriented economy will cause inflation and unemployment. That's why Beck is here, meeting with the likes of Paine Webber, Solomon Brothers, A&P, and GE. Beck says Hungary needs more than new joint ventures. He emphasizes Hungary wants foreign participation in existing Hungarian companies. Grant Perry, CNN Business News, New York.
Joining us now to talk about economic change in Hungary and its implications for trade with the West, Tamas Beck, Hungary's Minister of Trade. Welcome to Moneyline, Minister.
Thank you very much.
You were depicted as a champion of profit, a change. Well, you have just been down in Washington speaking to many of the political leaders in our trade and commerce machine in this country. What are you asking for?
Oh, I was invited by Mr. Mosbacher, Secretary of Commerce. He was in September in Hungary, and we had very good discussions with Mr. Mosbacher. In the first part of the next year, we will have a new U.S.-Hungarian trade agreement, and this will build on the changes which happened in the last month.
What does Hungary want?
Hungary wants free business possibilities in the U.S., the same possibilities for trade and business as any other countries, without restrictions, without quotas, and without contingents, and wants foreign investment for a structure changing in the Hungarian industry.
Now, you just struck a $150 million deal with General Electric. Is that the sort of deal you want?
I don't know if this is the sort. In Hungary, there are now 650 joint venture companies with Western participation. About the 650, excuse me, only 30 is the U.S.-Hungarian joint venture company, and only a few is working in the production.
One of the, excuse me, Mr. Minister, one of the things I wanted to point out is that you're trying to put foreign investment incentives in place. An important one that I read in the research is that you're guaranteeing the repatriation of capital if any problems develop.
Hungary paid till now all the debts what was taken by the former governments and Hungary punctually and exactly. We doesn't ask for moratories as other countries, but to have a structure changing and pay back a very high debt service this year, more than $3 billion, is for us impossible to do the same to do both at the same time. And therefore we need foreign investment, working capital, and foreign participation in a lot of Hungarian companies and the industry.
Now, in a lot of ways, when the Minister of Trade has to go over to the United States, you're on the road. You almost have to be selling. I'm an American capitalist. Why should I invest in Hungary as opposed to Czechoslovakia or Poland?
This is a very good question, and we doesn't think that your investment banks or your companies will invest in Hungary because they have a good heart. They will only invest if they see that the money is safe in Hungary and the profit is high.
You are ahead of some of your compatriots in the Eastern Bloc. How does it feel to have this free market approach? You're about a year ahead in many ways in setting up the market structures.
Yes, in Hungary we are doing something what never happened in the history. At the same time we are building up a pluralistic democratic system and a market economy, a real working good market economy. Because if Spain and Portugal went over from a dictatorship to a democratic system, they had a market economy. And so it was much easier. But I think we will solve this problem.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Tamas Beck, Minister of Trade from Hungary. When we return, Moneyline columnist Dan Dorfman will...
And so on. Von Habsburg represented for many here not the glory, but all the evils of the old aristocratic and militaristic Europe, which were better left forgotten.
It was a different Europe when the von Habsburgs were in power, a Europe of rivalries and jealousies, of secret alliances and squabbling nation-states. It was a Europe where each period of peace seemed to be only prelude to the next war.
But then came the war to end all war. Really, it was the war to end the old order, because there would be yet another world conflict ahead. Von Habsburg lived through both wars, and as much as he has long been an unwilling symbol of the past, he is today a personification of the future Europe, a member of the European Parliament, who travels the continent endlessly pushing European unity, not by might and marriage as his ancestors tried, but by political integration.
What's the Europe of the future look like in your view?
You see, my idea is a united confederal Europe with a great deal of autonomy, of course, because that is absolutely needed. We are going to achieve this, and it will be one of the great powers of the world. I would say one of the three great powers after the year 2000.
Von Habsburg has long labored for the Pan-European Union, an organization dedicated to uniting the continent. Just this week, he addressed groups in Paris, Vienna, and Brussels. As unrealistic as his dreams of confederation might have seemed only a year ago, the radical changes on the continent now have suddenly given his arguments new weight.
First of all, I think that this super balance here, a superpower balance, was really a system which paralyzed the whole development. It wasn't a healthy balance. It was a tremendously unhealthy balance, all this Yalta system. Now that this is crumbling down, I think we are going to get back to normalcy.
Earlier this year, von Habsburg saw a bit of the kind of European normalcy he might favor when he was warmly received in Budapest, the old twin capital of the Habsburg Empire. Some Hungarians urged him to declare himself candidate for president in the country's first free election since the war. He declined and insists that a return to what he calls normalcy in Europe does not mean a return to the old alliances and divisions.
Space has no longer the significance it had in the past. Since the intercontinental ballistic missiles, there is no more space as a strategic or as a political notion.
The heir to the empire claims he finds it more interesting to be a member of the European Parliament than an emperor, and says he has no desire to bring back the bad old days. For the next generation of Habsburgs, like his son Karl, there can be no nostalgia for the past, not even when passing the palaces which once would have been his heritage.
When I'm walking the streets, of course I have a personal feeling about all those buildings, monuments that I could see that were built. Most of them were built in the monarchy, but it's not the kind of it's more the feeling of an Austrian being proud of its history. It's not so much the feeling of being a Habsburg and kind of looking back in anger at the fact that we are now living in a republic. That doesn't exist in me. Do you think that Europeans are smarter now? What have they learned to avoid the squabbles of the past?
Well, in the first place, I will tell you, people rarely learn anything. But it is absolutely logical, at least for this generation, that from the problems now, we know that we have to unite in order to be strong enough.
As von Habsburg tells it, the divisions of the old world are quickly disappearing. The future here belongs to those who join in to erase them. There are echoes of his ancestors in his talk of unification, but the generations which follow must go about it legitimately, according to Franz Joseph Otto von Habsburg, member, European Parliament. For Sunday Today, Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Paris.